Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Frank Mularcik, and in this video, we're going to be doing a brief stock analysis on Microsoft stock, ticker symbol MSFT. I'm really excited for this one because Microsoft is actually the largest holding in my dividend portfolio. So let's get right into it. So first of all, we're just going to take a look at their Q3 earnings for fiscal year of 2021. So their quarters are a bit off from the calendar year. So their third quarter actually goes from the beginning of January to the end of March. So the third quarter of fiscal year 2021 ended on March 31st, 2021, and they released the results a few months ago on April 27th, 2021. So these are their results. They had revenues for the quarter of 41.7 billion, which increased 19% year over year. They had operating income of 17 billion, which increased 31% year over year. Net income of 15.5 billion GAAP and 14.8 billion non-GAAP, which both increased 44% and 38%. Diluted earnings per share of $2.03 GAAP and $1.95 non-GAAP, which increased 45 cents and 39 cents respectively. And their GAAP results include a 620 million net income tax benefit, which is explained below. Satya Nadella said, over a year into the pandemic, digital adoption curves aren't slowing down, they're accelerating, and it's just the beginning. We are building the cloud for the next decade, expanding our addressable market and innovating across every layer of the tech stack to help our customers be resilient and transition. So I think that's super promising to hear that they're still seeing accelerated use of their platforms, and it's not just slowing down now that we're coming out of the pandemic here. So here is the results just in a little table here. It's pretty much the same stuff we just saw before. And then down here they have some financial data from each of their segments. So in the productivity and business processes segment, their revenues were $13.6 billion, which increased 15% year over year, and 12% accounting for currency changes. So they said Office commercial products and cloud services revenue increased 14%, which was driven by Office 365 commercial revenue growth of 22%. Office consumer products and cloud service revenue increased 5%, and Microsoft 365 consumer subscribers increased to 50.2 million. LinkedIn revenue increased 25%, and Dynamics products and cloud services revenue increased 26%, driven by Dynamics 365 revenue growth of 45%. So all those are, double-digit revenue growths, I think, in all those segments. So that is super awesome. And then in the intelligent cloud segment, revenue was $15.1 billion, and it increased 23%. And their server products and cloud services revenue increased 26%, driven by the Azure revenue growth of 50%. So that's just crazy how much Azure is growing, and it's continuing to grow. And you're really seeing that growth across other companies like Amazon Web Services as well. They're still having a ton of growth. And then in the personal computing segment, they had revenues of 13 billion, which was a 19% increase. Windows OEM revenue increased 10%, commercial products and cloud services revenue increased 10%, Xbox content and services revenue increased 34%, and search advertising revenue, excluding traffic acquisition costs, increased 17%, and Surface revenue increased 12%. So I think it's pretty astounding that all their revenues, I pretty much think every single revenue, except maybe if you count this Windows commercial products and look at the constant currency number, all these revenues were up double digits, which is just crazy. Oftentimes revenues are up double digits in some segments, and some segments they're, maybe only up a little bit or down, but to have all these segments be growing so much is fantastic. And Microsoft returned $10 billion to shareholders last year in the form of, that was just in the third quarter. They returned 10 billion in the form of share repurchases and dividends, which is an increase of 1% compared to the third quarter of 2020. And right now we're just looking at the balance sheet as well, and this was actually from the 2020 10K annual report. So that came out, at the end of June 2020. So these numbers are pretty much a year out of date. But hopefully we'll be able to look at the 2021 numbers sometime soon. But looking at these is definitely, still helpful. So looking at the current assets, the total current assets are sitting at $182 billion, at least as of a year ago, which were up a few $1 billion from 2019. And the current liabilities were sitting at $72 billion, which was up a few billion from $69 billion in 2019. So, well over double the current assets of current liabilities. And then, total assets sitting over $300 billion and total liabilities only sitting at $183 billion. So that's pretty incredible, the just amount of assets they have there. And another notable thing is Microsoft just crossed the $2 trillion mark. I think as of now they're closer to $2.1 trillion as their valuation. So that's pretty cool to see, only the second company after Apple to do that. And then we're also going to take a look at some of their dividends, because it is in my dividend portfolio, and the one thing that some people might not like is that the dividend yield right now is only 0.81%. And the good thing, however, is that their payout ratio is super low at only 29%, and as well they have a nice dividend growth rate here of around 10% in the last 5 years. I think this year their increase was maybe around 8%. I forget, it was back in the fall. So we'll be looking forward to another big increase in the fall. And they have been growing that dividend for 17 years. So I'm sure in 8 years or so they will be on that dividend aristocrats list, just if they keep continuing to pay out that dividend. And we're also going to look at the dividend yield over time, because like I said, that dividend yield was definitely not as low when I bought the stock. Just looking back in 2019, the dividend yield was around 1.7%, which is close to double where it is now. And when I first bought the stock, it was probably somewhere in here. It was above 1% at least. And even though they've increased the dividend since then, the stock price has just been going absolutely crazy recently. Obviously it has to have been to have broken that $2 trillion mark. And that brings us into the valuation. So if we look here, you can see their PE ratio, and through the 2010s, Microsoft really didn't get a lot of love in the 2010s, to be honest. They were 10, 8, 11, 12, 13 PE ratio, 16 in 2014, 2015, and then they really started going up here. This seems like a bit of an anomaly, and then they're around 20, and then 25, and as of now they're sitting at 37.78 PE, which is pretty high, it seems to me, for them historically, and pretty high for the whole market, which we're going to look at. But as you can see from the actual earnings, their earnings have been growing much more rapidly in the past 5 years. So maybe that higher PE is a little bit more justified, because you can see from the 2007 range to 2014, their earnings really didn't grow all that much, but since then the earnings have more than tripled, I think. So that's pretty remarkable, I think, and maybe part of the reason they're seeing such a high valuation right now. And also taking a look at the information technology sector as a whole, Microsoft is definitely within the software segment. They do have hardware, they sell laptops obviously, and computers, but mainly they're in the software industry there. So the average PE ratio for the software is 44.98. So Microsoft is definitely below that, and they are right around that average for the entire sector of 37.74. So compared to technology, Microsoft is pretty much fairly valued, but compared to the overall market and their historic performance, I think that they are a bit overvalued. The one thing I will add with that valuation is the difference that a CEO makes. And just going back to look at their PE ratio throughout the years, I think that part of the reason as well of this higher PE is just because of the confidence that shareholders have in Satya Nadella. And I'm really not trying to say anything negative about Steve Ballmer, but I mean, he was definitely not as popular of a CEO from my understanding, and I think Satya has been doing a really good job, and I think shareholders are seeing that, and these EPS trends are sort of reflecting that. Obviously it's not Satya Nadella who's solely responsible for increasing earnings for Microsoft, but I think a lot of people have a lot of confidence in him, and I think that all of these positive things we're talking about are sort of affecting the higher valuation that Microsoft sees. And finally, just taking a look in my portfolio, you can see right now I have 0.45 shares, and these shares are valued right around $125, which is currently the only position that's over $100 in my portfolio, and that's 8% of the portfolio with a dividend of 0.8%. My yield on cost is 1.03%, which comes out to an annual dividend that they're going to pay me of $1.01. So we're also going to look, at the performance here of Microsoft stock, and you can see that for me, my average cost here is $218.09, and the current price of Microsoft stock is $279, which I personally did not know if it was that high at all. I thought it was like 260. So I invested about $97 into Microsoft, which is currently worth $125, like we said. So those returns are $27, which is a 28% return in around a year, maybe a little bit more than a year. So I am more than happy with that, and I could not be more excited for the future of Microsoft. So I would love to hear what you guys think of Microsoft. I'm sure a lot of people own it. It's a pretty popular stock. I would say for a lot of dividend investors, it's probably not as popular just because of that low yield. And for someone young like myself, I think the low yield is not that big of a deal, since they have been increasing that dividend pretty rapidly, and I think that they're going to continue increasing that dividend pretty rapidly. But I can definitely understand, if you're a little bit closer to retirement, you're not going to have as much time for that dividend growth to compensate for the low yield. So I actually did a video in the past talking about Satya Nadella's book Hit Refresh, which is sort of about his life and what he tried to do when he came on at Microsoft, and just it talked a lot about Microsoft and their business and what they do. So I thought that was really interesting. I'll leave a link to that video right up here if you guys want to check that out. And I want to thank you guys for watching the video. I really do appreciate it. I would love to hear any thoughts you have on Microsoft in the comments below, and I will see you in the next video.